The great hall was built to catch every sound. The walls curved inward like the inside of a large shell. The floor was made of smooth stone that rang like a bell when anyone walked on it. In this place, silence was treated as a flaw. Every word had to be sung. Every order had to be measured in pitch and tone. The Velari people did not just speak. They performed. Their voices rose and fell in steady waves. The air in the room felt thick with music. He stood near the back of the hall. He wore a plain gray uniform. It had no bright colors, no silver threads, no glowing badges. It was made for work, not for display. A small data pad rested in his left hand. His right hand stayed at his side. He did not shift his weight. He did not try to match their rhythm. He only watched. He only listened. He was a human engineer sent to check the old orbital grid that kept the city safe from solar storms. The grid was failing. The numbers on his pad proved it, but the Velari did not trust numbers. They trusted voices. They believed that if a problem existed, it could be sung away. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform. On it sat the young princess. Her name was Vales. She was new to the throne, but her voice already ruled the room. Her robes were light blue and silver. They moved with every breath she took. A crown of thin metal rings circled her head. It did not rest heavy. It was built to vibrate with her tone. She looked down at the crowd. Her eyes were pale and sharp. She saw everything. The court was in the middle of a daily ceremony. They sang reports. They sang requests. They sang praise for the grid even as the lights above them flickered. He noted the flicker. He tapped his pad. A small warning icon blinked red. He saved the reading. He did not look up. Then the music stopped. The room went quiet, but only for a moment. Vales raised one hand. The silence was her command. All eyes turned to the center of the floor. She spoke, and her voice was clear like water over glass. "We welcome the quiet visitor," she said. The words carried to every corner of the hall. He comes from a world of dust and steel, a world that does not know the weight of a true note. He kept his face still. He knew what was coming. He had read the reports. He knew their customs. He also knew the grid had 3 cracked conduits and 2 failing pressure seals. He kept his eyes on the floor. Vales stood. The rings on her crown hummed softly. "Tell us, human," she continued. "Do your people still hide behind their silence? Do you fear the sound of your own voice? Or is your tongue too heavy for the music of reason?" A few nobles laughed. Their laughter was not loud. It was tuned. It rose in thirds, then fell in fifths. It sounded like wind through glass tubes. It was meant to shame. It was meant to break him. He did not flinch. He tapped his pad again. He checked the temperature readings from the outer ring. He logged the data. He closed the file. He looked up at last. His eyes met hers. They were calm. They held no anger. They held no fear. They only held focus. Vales tilted her head. She expected a reply. She expected him to step forward. She expected him to raise his voice, to try and match her, to fail and bow his head. That was the game. That was how the Velari measured worth. You spoke. You were judged. You lost, or you earned your place. But he did not play their game. He had spent years fixing broken machines in deep space. He had worked in places where a wrong sound could bring the roof down. He had learned early that words do not hold pressure. Hands do. Tools do. Care does. He had come to fix a system that kept millions alive. He had not come to sing. He took one slow breath. He looked at the princess. He looked at the court. He looked at the ceiling where the grid controls hummed above them. He saw the stress lines in the stone. He heard the faint crackle in the air. He knew the truth. The system was tired. It needed steady work. It did not need more noise. He turned his body. He placed the data pad in his coat pocket. He adjusted his gloves. Then he began to walk. His boots made a soft, steady sound on the ringing floor. Step, step, step. No rush, no pause, just forward motion. "You leave without a word," Vales called out. Her voice sharpened. The harmony broke. "You dare turn your back on the court. Your silence is not wisdom. It is weakness. It is the sound of a mind that has nothing to offer." The nobles joined her. Their voices rose. They sang insults in perfect tune. They called him dull. They called him broken. They called him a child who could not face the light. The sound filled the hall. It pressed against the walls. It echoed in the high arches. It was meant to stop him. He kept walking. He did not speed up. He did not slow down. He did not look back. He knew the shape of the exit. He knew the weight of the door. He knew the path to the lift. He had mapped it the moment he arrived. He had measured the distance. He had timed his steps. He did not need to argue. He did not need to prove himself to people who believed a song could fix a crack in metal. The doors at the far end of the hall stood open. Cool air drifted in from the outer corridor. He passed under the stone arch. He crossed the threshold. The music faded behind him. The laughter lost its echo. The heavy air grew light. Outside, the hall was quiet. The walls here were flat. The floor was rubberized for grip. There were no echoes. There were no performances. There was only the hum of the station. There was only the steady beat of the ventilation. There was only the work waiting to be done. He stopped for a second. He pulled the data pad from his pocket. He opened the last file. He read the numbers again. 3 cracked conduits, 2 failing seals, 1 unstable core. The margin for error was shrinking. The next solar wave would push it past the breaking point. He saved the file. He locked the screen. He put the pad away. He walked to the maintenance lift. He pressed the call button. The light turned green. The doors opened. He stepped inside. He did not look back toward the great hall. He did not wonder if they were still singing. He did not care if they mocked his name. He knew what he had seen. He knew what he had heard. He knew what the numbers said. The lift doors closed. The station moved around him. The young princess had laughed. The court had joined her. They had called his silence a flaw. They had called it empty. They were wrong. Silence was not empty. Silence was space. It was room to think. It was room to watch. It was room to prepare. He stood still as the lift dropped. His hands stayed at his sides. His mind stayed clear. He had come to fix a broken system. He would do it. Not with a song, not with a speech, with steady hands, with quiet steps, with tools that worked. The lift stopped. The doors opened. The corridor ahead was dim and narrow. Cables ran along the ceiling. Pipes lined the walls. Warning lights blinked in slow rhythm. He stepped out. He pulled a small kit from his belt. He checked the seals. He checked the couplings. He checked the power cells. Everything was ready. He began to walk again. The mockery stayed behind him. The numbers stayed in his head. The work waited ahead. He did not speak. He did not need to. The truth was already moving. The maintenance room was small and cold. It sat on the edge of the human docking ring, far from the singing halls and polished floors of the Velari court. The walls were bare metal. The lights were steady and white. There was no music here. There was only the low hum of cooling fans and the soft click of a keyboard. He sat at a narrow desk. His coat was off. His sleeves were rolled up. A thick stack of printed schematics lay flat in front of him. He had pulled every public reading from the orbital grid. He had run his own scans during the ceremony. Now he connected the data to his terminal. The screen filled with lines and numbers. The picture was clear. The system was breaking. The Velari grid was not a simple machine. It was a network of crystal conduits that carried energy from the solar collectors down to the city shields. It was designed to respond to sound. Command frequencies kept the crystals aligned. Royal tones adjusted the flow. Choirs maintained the balance. It was beautiful. It was also fragile. Crystals did not bend well. They cracked under stress. The stress was growing. His scans showed 3 major fracture points in the lower ring. 2 pressure seals were leaking harmonic energy. The vocal interface could not compensate. It only made things worse. Every time the engineers sang a correction, the feedback pushed the cracks wider. The system was caught in a loop. It needed a steady hand. It needed a hard reset. It needed a bypass. He opened a blank file. He did not type a report. He drew a plan. His fingers moved slowly across the touch pad. He mapped a route through the secondary service tunnels. These tunnels were not on the official maps. They were built for emergencies. They were tight, dark, and full of dust. He marked every junction. He noted every locked door. He calculated the weight of the override couplings. He checked the power draw for a manual reroute. The math was simple. It did not need poetry. It needed precision. He saved the file under a plain name. He did not send it to the court. He knew what would happen if he did. They would read it. They would laugh. They would say a human could not understand a system built on harmony. They would ignore it until the sky burned. He had seen it before. Pride always ignored the warning until the roof fell. He stood up. He walked to the storage locker on the far wall. He opened it. Inside, everything was organized. Wrenches, torque drivers, thermal shims, voltage testers, heavy gloves, and a roll of reinforced cable. Each tool had a place. Each piece had a purpose. He did not collect them for show. He collected them because they worked. He pulled a heavy tool belt from the top shelf. He laid it on the table. He began to fill it. First, the main coupling wrench. It was made of black steel. It fit his hand perfectly. Next, the calibration wheels. They were small, heavy, and marked with fine lines. They would let him adjust the flow by touch. No screens, no voice commands, just metal on metal. He added a thermal bypass kit. He packed extra fuses. He checked the charge on his headlamp. He tested the grip on his gloves. Everything clicked into place. The weight felt familiar. It felt right. He sat back down for a moment. He looked at the schematics again. He traced the path with his finger. He memorized the turns. He counted the steps between checkpoints. He noted the blind corners. He marked the spots where the air grew thin and the temperature dropped. He did not rush. He did not guess. He built the route in his mind the way a builder reads a wall. He knew where the weak points were. He knew where the pressure would build. He knew exactly where to stand when the system shook. Human engineers did not wait for permission to prepare. They prepared because waiting was a waste of time. They knew machines did not care about titles. They cared about force, friction, and balance. You gave them the right push. They held. You gave them the wrong push. They broke. It was that simple. He stood again. He fastened the belt around his waist. He checked the buckles. He pulled on his boots. They were heavy with thick soles and steel toes. They were made for walking on grates, for climbing ladders, for standing firm when the floor vibrated. He walked to the door. He paused. He looked back at the desk. The screen still showed the red warning lines. The grid was tired. It was holding on by habit, not by strength. The next solar flare would not be gentle. It would hit with full force. The city would shake. The shields would strain. The crystal conduits would shatter if they were not rerouted in time. He had maybe 2 days, maybe less. The math did not lie. He stepped into the corridor. The air was cooler here. The lights were dimmer. The station moved around him with quiet power. He walked toward the service lift. His steps were steady. His breathing was even. He did not feel fear. He did not feel anger. He felt focus. The mockery in the great hall felt far away now. It belonged to a different world, a world of sound and show. His world was made of metal and motion. It was made of things that could be held, measured, and fixed. He did not need to prove anything to people who thought a song could stop a crack in stone. He only needed to reach the core. He only needed to turn the wheels. He only needed to hold the line until the storm passed. The lift doors opened before he pressed the button. The system recognized his clearance. It always did. Humans were allowed to work. They were just not allowed to speak. He stepped inside. The doors closed. The car began to drop. The numbers on the panel ticked down. Level 4, Level 5, Level 6. He stood still. His hands rested at his sides. His mind reviewed the plan one last time. He pictured the first junction. He pictured the coupling point. He pictured the exact moment he would lock the bypass. He did not imagine failure. He imagined the work. That was enough. The lift stopped. The doors slid open. A long corridor stretched ahead. It was narrow and lined with thick pipes. Warning signs hung from the ceiling. They were written in Velari script, but the symbols were universal. Danger, high voltage, restricted access. He ignored the signs. He had clearance. He had a reason. He stepped out. The floor was metal grating. It rang softly under his boots. He adjusted his headlamp. He turned it on. A bright beam cut through the dim air. He began to walk. Moved with purpose. He counted the turns. He checked the pressure gauges on the wall. They were all in the yellow zone, not yet critical but climbing. He passed a sealed door. He scanned his key. The lock turned with a heavy click. He pushed it open. The air inside was still. The walls were lined with old conduits. Dust covered the floor. It was quiet here, perfectly quiet. He liked it. Silence was not empty. It was clean. It let him hear the machine. It let him feel the vibration in the floor. It let him know exactly where the stress was building. He reached the first checkpoint. He knelt. He placed his hand on the main pipe. He felt the tremor. It was steady but sharp. A hairline fracture was spreading beneath the insulation. He marked the spot with a chalk line. He noted the reading on his pad. He stored it. He stood up. He adjusted his belt. He checked his tools. Everything was secure. He looked ahead. The path continued. It led deeper. It led to the core. He took a step, then another. He did not speak. He did not need to. The work was already moving. The grid would hold, not because of a song, not because of a crown, but because someone was willing to walk into the dark and turn the wheel. He kept going. The numbers in his head stayed clear. The path ahead stayed straight. He was ready. The alarm did not start as a sound. It started as a shake. The floor plates in the lower corridor jumped against his boots. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin gray lines. He stopped walking. He placed his hand on the wall. The metal was warm. It vibrated with a sharp, uneven pulse. He pulled his data pad from his coat. The screen flashed red. The solar wave had arrived. It was early. The projection said 2 days. The sun did not care about projections. It fired. Now. Far above in the great hall, the singing stopped. The sky outside the crystal dome turned white. The orbital grid caught the full force of the storm. Energy flooded the conduits. The Velari engineers ran to the command dais. They opened their mouths. They sang the old stabilization chants. Their voices rose in perfect harmony, but the crystals were cracked. The sound did not calm the system. It pushed against the fractures. The feedback loop began. A high whine cut through the air. Lights flickered and died. Conduits groaned. The floor cracked under the platform. Princess Vaili stood at the center. She raised her hands. She tried to sing the royal decree, the highest tone of control. Her voice was clear. It was strong. It meant nothing to the breaking metal. The harmonic matrix overloaded. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The court scattered. The music turned to screams. The system was tearing itself apart. He did not hear the screams. He felt them through the floor. The tremor grew stronger. He checked the pad again, core temperature climbing, pressure seals failing, cascade risk at 80%. He closed the screen. He did not run. Running wasted breath. It wasted balance. He adjusted his tool belt. He checked the straps. He turned on his headlamp. The beam cut through the falling dust. He kept walking. His pace did not change. Step, step, step. The corridor narrowed. Pipes ran along the walls like thick veins. Some were hot to the touch. Some were shaking. He moved close to the left wall. He avoided the center. He knew where the stress points were. He had mapped them. He followed the line. A heavy door blocked the path. The lock panel was dark. The power had cut. He did not panic. He knelt. He pulled a small pry bar from his belt. He slid it under the edge of the panel. He applied steady pressure. The metal groaned. The cover popped off. Wires hung loose. He found the manual release lever. It was stiff. He gripped it with both hands. He pulled. His muscles burned. The lever moved. A loud click echoed in the tunnel. The door slid open an inch. He pushed it wide. He slipped through. He did not look back. The air grew thinner here. The temperature dropped. Frost formed on the edges of the pipes. His breath came out in short white clouds. He adjusted his collar. He checked his oxygen gauge. It was still full. He kept moving. The floor tilted slightly. The station was compensating for the energy loss. It was working hard to stay level. It would not last. He knew the numbers. He knew the limits. He trusted the tools in his belt more than the station failing computers. Another tremor hit. This one was stronger. A pipe burst on the right. Steam hissed into the corridor. The sound was sharp. It echoed off the metal walls. He did not flinch. He stepped around the spray. He kept his eyes forward. He counted his steps. He matched them to the rhythm of his breathing. In, out, step, step. The human mind worked best when it had a task. He had a task. He would not let the noise break his focus. He reached a junction marked with a faded yellow stripe. This was the turn. He followed the line left. The corridor opened into a wider service bay. Crates sat stacked against the wall. A broken cart lay on its side. The ceiling lights flickered. One died, another buzzed and stayed on. He walked to the center of the bay. He stopped. He listened. Beneath the hiss of steam and the groan of metal, he heard it, a deep, steady hum, the primary conduit. It was still running, but it was straining. The vibration was wrong. It was uneven. It needed to be redirected. Now. He pulled out his calibration wheels. He tested their weight in his hands. They were cold. They were solid. He moved toward the far wall. A heavy access panel covered the main junction. He placed his hands on the edge. He pushed. It did not move. Bolts held it tight. He took a torque driver from his belt. He found the first bolt. He fitted the head. He turned. The metal resisted. He applied more force. The bolt turned. 1, 2, 3. He moved to the next. He worked fast but steady. He did not rush. He did not guess. He followed the pattern bolt by bolt. The panel loosened. He set it on the floor. The space behind it was dark. Cables ran in tight bundles. Conduits crossed in a tight web. The heat coming from it was intense. He checked his gloves. He pulled them tight. He reached in. His fingers found the primary coupling. It was hot. He ignored the heat. He found the manual release ring. It was stiff. He gripped it. He pulled. It did not budge. He braced his foot against the wall. He leaned his weight into the pull. The ring moved a fraction. He pulled again. It clicked. The coupling disengaged. A shower of sparks flew. He stepped back. He waited for the flash to fade. The hum changed pitch. It dropped lower. The pressure was shifting. Good. He had started the reroute. He worked quickly now. He attached the first bypass cable. He locked it in place with a steel clamp. He checked the connection. It was tight. He moved to the second conduit. He repeated the process. Disconnect, attach, clamp, check. His hands moved without hesitation. He had done this 100 times, not on crystal grids, not on singing stations, but on broken pumps, on dead engines, on ships that refused to fly. The material changed. The principle did not. Energy needed a path. You gave it a safe one, it followed. You left it trapped, it broke free. It was simple physics. It did not care about crowns or choirs. A loud crack echoed from above. The station shuddered. Dust poured from the ceiling. A support beam groaned. He did not look up. He kept his eyes on the couplings. He tightened the last clamp. He checked the voltage meter on his belt. The numbers stabilized. The reroute was holding for now. But it was only the first stage. The core needed manual alignment. The control spire was above him. He had to reach it before the backup seals failed. He packed his tools. He secured his belt. He stood up. His legs ached. His hands were hot. He did not stop. He turned toward the heavy blast door at the end of the bay. The door was sealed. Red warning lights spun on the frame. The lock was electronic. The power was gone. He walked to the side panel. He found the emergency override slot. He pulled a heavy iron key from his pouch. He slid it in. He turned it. The mechanism ground against rust and age. It resisted. He put his shoulder into it. He pushed. The key turned. A loud thud echoed through the door. The locks disengaged. The door did not open on its own. The hydraulic assist was dead. He placed his hands on the cold metal. He pushed. His boots slipped on the dusty floor. He found his grip. He leaned his full weight forward. The door moved, inch by inch. The gap widened. Cold air rushed out. It smelled of ozone and burnt wire. He slipped through the opening. He stood in the final corridor. The primary control spire was just ahead. The doors at the end were thick and reinforced. Warning signs covered them. The air here was hot. The walls vibrated with a deep, angry frequency. He checked his pad one last time. The grid was at 92% overload. The backup seals would blow in minutes. He put the pad away. He unclipped the main override rig from his belt. It was heavy. It was made of black steel and thick rubber grips. He held it with both hands. He walked to the spire doors. He did not knock. He did not call out. He placed the rig against the manual release plate. He prepared to turn the wheel. The storm raged outside. The station shook. The music of the court was gone. Only the work remained. He took a breath. He began to turn the handle. The heavy doors of the control spire gave way with a deep metallic groan. He stepped inside. The air was thick and hot. It tasted of burnt copper and ozone. Emergency lights cast long, red shadows across the floor. The walls shook with a steady, angry vibration. Wires hung from broken panels. Sparks jumped from cracked conduits. The room was built for machines, not for comfort. In the center stood the main control column. It was a tall structure of glass and steel, covered in cracked screens and dead touch pads. Beside it stood the princess. She was not on a throne. She was not surrounded by courtiers. Her blue robes were torn at the hem. Her silver crown sat crooked on her head. Her hands were pressed flat against the glass column. Her face was pale. Her lips were dry. She had been singing for hours. Her voice was gone. Only rough breaths came from her chest. She turned when he entered. Her eyes were wide. They held fear, exhaustion, and a sharp, sudden hope. She expected words. She expected him to step forward and claim victory. She expected him to tell her that her people were wrong, that their music had failed, that a human would save them while making a speech about it. He did not speak. He did not look at her face. He looked at the column. He looked at the cracked screens. He looked at the pressure gauges built into the base. They were all in the red. He set his heavy boot on the metal grating. He unclipped his override rig from his belt. He placed it on the floor with a soft thud. He walked to a storage cabinet on the wall. He opened it. Inside were emergency tools, manual wheels, heavy levers, tactile dials. They were covered in dust. They had not been used in generations. He pulled out two large calibration wheels. They were made of dark metal. They had deep grooves for grip. He walked back to the center of the room. He stopped in front of her. He held out one wheel. She stared at it. She did not take it. He did not push it into her hands. He simply held it steady. He pointed to a fracture node on the lower ring of the column. A thick cable ran from it into a broken junction box. The cable was shaking. The insulation was peeling. He tapped the wheel. He tapped the node. He made a slow, turning motion with his free hand. The meaning was clear: turn this. Match the flow, hold it steady. She hesitated. Her hands trembled. She looked at her own hands. They were soft. They were made for gestures and ceremonies, not for heavy metal. She looked back at him. His face was calm. His eyes were fixed on the work. There was no pity. There was no anger. There was only a quiet demand for action. She reached out. Her fingers closed around the wheel. It was heavier than she expected. The metal was warm. She lifted it. He nodded once. He turned to the opposite side of the column. He began to work. He knelt. He slid his calibration wheel into a locked socket. It clicked into place. He gripped the outer rim. He pulled. The wheel resisted. The system was fighting him. He adjusted his stance. He braced his shoulders. He pulled again. Slowly the wheel turned. One click, two clicks. The vibration in the floor changed. It grew softer. The pitch dropped. He moved to the next socket. He repeated the motion. Find the resistance. Apply steady force. Listen to the change. Feel the shift in the metal. He worked without rush. His breathing was even. His hands moved with practiced certainty. He did not look up. He did not check if she was keeping up. He trusted the process. Human engineering was not about speed. It was about control. It was about knowing exactly how much force to use. It was about not breaking what you were trying to fix. Across from him, Vayli struggled. She turned the wheel. It jerked. Sparks flew from the junction. She gasped and pulled back. The grid groaned. The red lights flashed faster. He did not stop. He kept turning his wheel. He matched the rhythm of the pressure drop. He felt the flow through the metal. He knew exactly how much force to apply. He glanced at her. He saw her panic. He stepped closer. He did not take the wheel from her. He placed his hand over hers on the rim. His grip was firm but gentle. He moved his hand in a slow, steady circle. He showed her the motion. Smooth, constant, no sudden pushes, no hesitation. He let her feel the rhythm. Then he removed his hand. He stepped back. He returned to his own station. She swallowed hard. She gripped the wheel again. She closed her eyes. She stopped trying to force it. She let her hands follow the motion he had shown her. She turned it slowly. The metal responded. The shaking in the cable lessened. The heat from the junction dropped. A soft hum replaced the harsh whine. She opened her eyes. She looked at him. He gave a single short nod. He pointed to the next node. She moved to it. She attached her wheel. She began to turn. Her movements were slower, but they were steady. The fear was gone. Focus had taken its place. She learned quickly. The Velari were smart. They just needed the right way to use their hands. They worked in silence. The only sounds were the grind of metal, the click of the couplings, and the steady rhythm of their breathing. The air grew cooler. The red lights faded to amber. The pressure gauges dropped from the danger zone into the yellow. He checked the main bypass valve. It was stuck. He wedged his boot against the base. He grabbed the lever with both hands. He pulled. His arms burned. His back ached. He did not stop. He pushed his weight forward. The lever moved. A loud hiss filled the room. Steam vented through a safety pipe. The core temperature dropped sharply. The grid settled into a low, even thrum. It was stable. It was holding. He let go of the lever. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove. He stood slowly. His joints popped. He looked at the gauges, all green. He turned to her. She was leaning against the column. Her chest rose and fell in deep breaths. Her hands were covered in grease and dust. Her crown had fallen to the floor. She did not pick it up. She looked at her hands, then she looked at him. Her eyes were wide. The arrogance was gone. The mockery was gone. In its place was something quiet and new. Understanding. She finally saw it. The silence was not empty. It was not weakness. It was space. It was room to think. It was room to act. It was the space between the notes where the real work happened. Words could not turn a wheel. Songs could not tighten a bolt. Only hands could. Only patience could. He picked up his tools. He wiped them clean with a cloth. He placed them back in his belt. He checked the couplings one last time. Everything was secure. He turned to leave. She spoke. Her voice was rough. It cracked on the first word, but the meaning was clear. "You did not say anything," she said. He stopped. He looked at her. She did not ask for a speech. She did not demand an explanation. She simply stood in the quiet room. The grid hummed behind them. It was a steady, reliable sound. It did not need a song to hold. It only needed care. He gave a small nod. It was enough. He walked to the door. He did not look back. The work was done. The station was safe. The silence remained. But this time it was not empty. It was full of respect. The station moved with a new rhythm. It was not the loud, singing pulse of before. It was a steady, even hum. The crystal conduits still carried energy, but they no longer screamed. They held. The human engineer walked through the lower corridors. His boots made soft sounds on the metal grating. The air was clean. The warning lights were dark. He carried a small crate in his hands. It held the calibration wheels he had used in the control spire. They were scratched now. The metal was worn from use. He cleaned them before he packed them. He always cleaned his tools. It was a habit. It was a sign of respect for the work. He wiped each groove with a clean cloth. He checked the threads. He tested the weight. When they were ready, he placed them in a padded case. He closed the lid. He fastened the buckles. Everything had its place. Everything was accounted for. Things had changed in the weeks since the storm. The Velari did not stop singing. Music was part of their blood, but they no longer believed a song could fix a broken machine. Engineers now carried wrenches alongside tuning forks. Students in the upper academy studied human manuals. They read about torque, pressure, and thermal limits. They learned to read gauges instead of guessing by ear. The change was slow. It was quiet, but it was real. Court still held ceremonies, but the tone was different. The royal decrees were shorter. The debates were focused on facts. Princess Valise had made that shift. She had not ordered it with a loud command. She had simply placed a human torque driver on the central dais and left it there. The message was clear. Silence had value. Action had weight. The young nobles no longer mocked the quiet visitors. They watched them. They took notes. They learned that a problem did not care how pretty your voice sounded. It only cared if your hands knew what to do. He reached the maintenance bay. He set the crate on a steel table. He opened a storage locker. Inside, his gear waited. He sorted through the compartments. He checked each tool. He wiped the dust from the handles. He tested the spring tension on the pliers. He counted the spare fuses. Everything was in order. He did not feel pride. He did not feel regret. He felt ready. His job was done. The grid was stable. The seals were reinforced. The bypass routes were marked and locked. The station could handle the next solar wave. He knew because he had built the safety margin himself. Human engineers did not leave things to chance. They left them to math. They left them to proof. They left them to the quiet certainty of a machine that ran exactly as designed. A soft chime echoed from the doorway. A data pad rested on a small metal tray. It had been left by a station courier. He wiped his hands on a cloth. He picked up the pad. The screen lit up. There was no royal seal, no musical greeting, no long speech. Just a single line of text in plain font, "Teach us how to listen." He read it twice. He did not smile. He did not sigh. He simply placed the pad back on the tray. The words were not a request for lessons in sound. They were a request for lessons in patience, in observation, in the quiet space between action and reaction. The Velari had spent centuries filling the air with their voices. They were finally learning to hear what the machines were trying to say. He understood. It was a good start. It was more than most cultures ever managed. He closed the locker. He secured the latch. He picked up his main tool bag. It was heavy. It felt familiar. He walked to the airlock corridor. The station was quiet around him. The walls did not echo with choirs. They echoed with the steady pulse of ventilation fans and cooling pumps. It was a comfortable sound. It was the sound of a place that worked. He passed a group of young Velari technicians. They wore gray work suits now. They carried clipboards and pressure testers. They stopped when they saw him. They did not bow. They did not sing. They simply nodded. He nodded back. No words were needed. Respect did not require volume. It only required recognition. They had seen what happened when noise replaced skill. They had seen what happened when a quiet person walked into the dark and turned the wheel. They would not forget it. The launch bay was wide and open. The sky outside the observation windows was clear. The stars were sharp and cold. His shuttle sat on the center pad. It was a small, utilitarian craft. No gold trim, no painted crests, just reinforced hull plating, twin engines, and a reliable navigation array. He walked up the ramp. The metal rang softly under his boots. He stepped inside. The cabin was compact. The controls were worn but clean. He ran his pre-flight checks. He tested the comms. He checked the fuel levels. He verified the trajectory locks. Every switch clicked into place. Every gauge read green. He sat in the pilot's seat. He fastened the harness. He powered the main console. The screens lit up. The engines began a low, steady rumble. It was not a roar. It was a promise. It said the machine was ready. It said the path was clear. It said he knew exactly where he was going. He looked out the forward window. On the observation deck above the bay, a figure stood behind the glass. It was Vayli's. She wore simple robes, no crown, no silver threads. She stood with her hands at her sides. She did not wave. She did not call out. She simply watched. Her face was calm. Her eyes held the same quiet focus she had learned in the control spire. He placed his hand on the console. He gave a single, slow nod. She returned it. That was all. The shuttle doors sealed with a heavy hiss. The bay pressurized. The clamps released. He pushed the throttle forward. The engine spooled up. The craft lifted smoothly. No sudden burst. No dramatic flare. Just steady, controlled ascent. He guided it through the open sky. The station grew smaller behind him. The singing halls faded into the curve of the planet. The echoes stayed where they belonged. He adjusted the course. He set the autopilot. He leaned back in the seat. The vibration of the engines traveled through his boots, up his spine, into his hands. It was a familiar rhythm. It matched his breathing. He closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the Great Hall. He thought about the mockery. He thought about the weight of the calibration wheel. He thought about the space between the words. People often confused silence with emptiness. They thought it meant fear or ignorance or surrender. They were wrong. Silence was discipline. It was the choice to watch before acting, to measure before speaking, to let the work answer the noise. Humanity had not reached the stars by shouting at them. They had reached them by listening to the machines, by learning the language of pressure and flow, by trusting their hands when the world demanded a song. The shuttle cleared the upper atmosphere. The sky turned black. The stars stretched into sharp points of light. He opened the navigation log. He typed a single entry: grid stable, bypass secure, mission complete. He saved the file. He did not add a signature. He did not add a note. The numbers were enough. The truth was in the readings. It always had been. He adjusted the comms frequency. He opened a channel to the station. He did not send a farewell. He simply left the line open for a moment. Let them hear the steady hum of a working engine. Let them hear the quiet confidence of a ship that knew its place in the dark. Then he closed the channel. He set the course for home. Behind him, the Velari world continued its slow turn. The academies would keep teaching the new methods. The engineers would keep checking the seals. The princess would keep watching the gauges. They had learned that a crown does not hold back a storm. Only preparation does. Only patience does. Only the willingness to stand in the dark and turn the wheel. He watched the planet shrink in the rear monitor. He felt no need to explain himself. He felt no need to prove anything. The grid held. The station lived. The silence had done its work, and sometimes that was the loudest answer of all. He kept his hands on the controls. He kept his eyes on the stars. The engines hummed. The ship moved forward. The journey continued, exactly as it should, quietly, steadily, without a word.